Today we're creating a countdown timer that will show us how many seconds are left in some sort of task. Like you've got a quick 5 minute break, or you have a 15-minute break, or you've got a lunch break going on. You need to be able to click these buttons, or you can put in the number of minutes that you'd like. It's going to count it down as well as show you what time to be back. This is just because when I teach, we have breaks and people need to know how long a break is left, and they always ask me, "Hey Wes, how much time is left in the break?" And I say, "I'm not your dad." And then we built something so we could stop asking that question. So we want to first go into our scripts here, and I'm just going to make a function called timer, and we're just going to work in the console to start. And then what we are going to do is update this actual interface here. So we're going to make a function called timer. That's going to take in the number of seconds you wish for the timer to be in. And then we are going to do two things. Now, how do timers work? You have the amount of time that you wish for it to have, and then you simply elapse that time over however many seconds it is. In the past, what I've done is I would just set an interval, which has a function, and that function itself, let's get rid of all this junk. It would run every second. And then what I would do is I would just say seconds minus minus. And then it would just decrement the amount of seconds every single time. However, I did run into issues with that because set interval does not run sometimes. I found sometimes when I would tab away for a long time, it would simply just stop running it. I don't know if the browser does something funky there with pausing its intervals when it's not necessarily running. And then I also found on iOS, when you are scrolling, it will pause all of your intervals. And I think it does that for performance issues as well as making your scrolling nice and buttery smooth. Similar to how if you scroll a page, your animated GIFs will also stop. So it's not really a good use case there, because if I were to be scrolling for 10 seconds, then it would add an extra 10 seconds onto the break. So rather than doing that, we will use an interval, but in a different way. What we want to do is figure out when the timer started, which is const now equals date.now. And that's kind of a new one to the browser. Previously, we had to do like new date and then get time. But there is a new static method on date called now, and it will just give us the current timestamp in milliseconds. And then we also want then, which is now, plus the number of seconds which you wish to run the timer for. But that now is going to be in milliseconds, and seconds is obviously in seconds. So we just multiply that by 1,000. So let's console log now and then just to see what we've got going on here. If I were to refresh this, run timer 10, you see our now and our then values that we have here. Good. So those are working for us. Next, what we need to do is every single second, we need to display the amount of time left. And this is where we set an interval. And this is okay to use an interval here because we're really not worried about it running every single second if something happens. But like, let's say it were to skip 2 seconds, it will just update 2 seconds later and show us those two less seconds rather than one. So it's fine to use it here. We're going to run it every second, which is 1,000 milliseconds here. And then what we need to figure out is how much time is left on the clock. So we'll take our then, which is when it stops. We'll say const seconds left is equal to then minus, and we can't just say now because that was captured when it ran, but we need to run date.now once more. And again, now that's going to be in milliseconds, so we want to divide that by 1,000 so we can get seconds. So console log seconds left. See what we got here. 8.5, 7, 6, 5. So we have a bit of a rounding error here. Oh, that's a bit of a funky one. And I guess just because we're dealing with milliseconds and doing this division here, so you can wrap the entire thing in a math.round and then run it. You got 10, 9. There we go. And you may have just seen that it started going negative after a while. And why is that? Because intervals don't know when to stop themselves. So what we need to do here is before we display it, we need to check if we should stop it. And how do you stop? We'll say if the seconds left is less or equal to 0, then we want to stop it. So Obviously, we could return, which will stop the function from running, but that's not really going to help us. And I'll show you here. That's not going to totally stop this interval from running. It's just going to run, but not show us anything. So what we need to do is to store this interval in its own variable. So I'm going to go up here and say let countdown, and that's going to be our sort of higher level variable. In this case, it's a global variable. It's going to live on the window, but you could pop that in iffy and not have it in the global namespace. And then here we're going to simply update it. Countdown is equal to. And then here we will call clear interval and pass it the name of our timer, which is countdown. Then when we run it, let's run it with 3 seconds left, 2, 1, and then it will never run again because we hit this here. Real quick aside, sorry that I have to jump in here though, but I said less or equal to, but that ends up with leaving us 1 second. Obviously, we want less than 0 seconds, which is going to give us 2, 1, and 0. So not less or equal to, just less. All right, back to scheduled programming. Now, one other issue that we are running into is if I run 10 seconds, watch what happens. Only after 1 second elapses does it actually run. And the problem with that is that set interval, what we have right here, that does not run immediately. It has to wait for the first second to elapse. So what I want to do is we'll create a second function down here called display time left, which takes in seconds. And here we're going to console log the number of seconds left. And we're going to change that to minutes and whatnot. And then down here, instead of console logging it, we're going to display it, which it should still do the same thing. Still after a second. But then we could also run that as soon as the function is invoked. So we run display time left, and we'll pass it seconds. So we're going to run it immediately once, and then once again every single time that we do that interval. So here we go, timer 10. See, it does 10 immediately, and then we'll count down from 9 to 6 all the way down to 1. Good. So this little countdown function that we've written here is looking pretty good. Now I want to go down into our display time left and start working with converting it to minutes and seconds. In a previous video, what we did is we took all of our seconds and converted it to seconds, minutes, and hours. You can go grab that code right now if you'd like, or if you want a little bit of practice, figure it out yourself. We're only going to do minutes and seconds here, but you are welcome to do hours as well. So let's say const minutes is equal to seconds divided by 60. And let's just console what we have left. So if I were to run 70, we have 1.16 minutes left, 1.13. So what's going on here with that? Well, that's because we only want whole minutes. We don't care about those remainders here. So we'll say math.floor. We'll grab the lower bound of that number. And now if I were to run, let's do 124 seconds. So 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and then eventually it should get to 1 whole minute. There we go. And now we're worried about how many seconds are left. So it's a const remainder seconds. And that is going to be seconds mod 60. And mod will give us the remainder that we have. Minutes and remainder seconds. Timer. There we go. 3, 2, 1. That goes down to 1 minute and 59 seconds. Good. So we've got our minutes in our remainder seconds. Now we can start working with our HTML. We've got this display time left div here. And if we were to put that in a variable, const timer display is equal to document.query selector. We want to look for that. Then we'll go down here and create another variable, which is going to be our display time, which is going to look like something like 11:11, right? So how do we get the number of minutes left? It's simply just minutes, colon, number of remainder seconds. And then we take our timer display, which is our div. We set the text content to be display. And we can get rid of this console log because now we're dealing with actual DOM elements here. So if I were to run it, Oh, I spelt it wrong. Minutes, minute says. Now we run it. Oh, okay. Kind of working, but you see what the problem is here? When you have less than 10 seconds left, it just says 4 seconds, but we should be 0.4 seconds left. So how would we do that? Well, we could go to this remainder seconds and we'll say if the remainder seconds is greater than 10, or sorry, less than 10, then we want to return a 0. It's a question mark. This is a shorthand ternary operator. And otherwise, we're just going to return nothing. And that will give us a 0. And then finally, on the end here, you can just give us the remainder seconds left. So if we run it now with 124 seconds, we have that padded 0 on the front until it gets there. Another thing is we should update the tab on our browser here. It just says countdown timer. So we can simply just say document.title. What's document.title is the title tag in your HTML is equal to display. Now we're going to run it. There we go. It updates it as we're updating it. You can put that really wherever it is that you like. Now I want to work on that other function, which is showing the ending time. So if it's 2:30 and you have a 5-minute break, I want to say be back at 2:35. So we'll create a function called display end time. That's going to take in a timestamp of when you want to finish. That's our then time right here. So it takes in a timestamp. And we got to turn that timestamp into a date. Const end equals new date. And you want to pass it the timestamp. Why? If you've never worked with timestamps before, this is how they work. You have date.now, which is just a number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. That's when God created the earth. So that's the number of milliseconds that has elapsed since that amount of time. Now, if you were just to take this and put it in a string and then come back to JavaScript and be like, okay, I need to convert this back into a date, you say new date and you pass it the number of milliseconds that you have, and it's going to convert that. It's December 1st right now. Convert it into a proper timestamp for you. What's cool about that is you can put it in a variable called x, and then you can call x.get date, x.get day, x.get month, and you get all the information about what day and month and all that. That's a proper date. So that takes in a timestamp. We create a new date object from that. And then we can simply just get the hours. So we'll say const hour equals end.get hours. And const minutes is equal to end.get minutes. And then we'll say end time, which we don't have that yet. Let's go back up to the top here. What is our end time? Display end time. Grab that sucker. Const end time is equal to document.querySelector. And we'll grab the thing with the class of display end time. Okay, so we got this. End time.text content is equal to, and I'm just going to set it here. Previously, we put it in a variable called display. Why? Because I needed to use it more than once. I needed to use it to update the title as well as update the text content. But in this case, I just want to do it directly inside of here. So we'll say be back at, and then we will grab the hour, and we will grab the minutes. That easy, right? No, it's not going to be that easy, but let's give it a shot. So underneath in our timer, we're not going to run this in our interval because it doesn't need to be updated every second. It just needs to happen once when you run the timer. So simply just display end time. You pass it then, which is the end time. So if I were to run our timer with, 3,000 seconds to pass it into it, we got 50 minutes left. But the problem is that I am not European and I do not understand what 15 o'clock is. I do know that I should be back at 3:11. So we need to then go into here. And if you're European, congratulations. You can leave this part and maybe go get a pop or something like that. But we Canadians and Americans and whoever else is normal needs to go into this hour. And we'll say if the hour is greater than 12, then we need to return the hour minus 12. Otherwise, we want to just return the hour. And if this is a little bit too funky for you, you can simply just go in here and create a new variable, const adjusted hour is equal to, we'll return the hour minus 12. So if it is 13 o'clock, take away 12, it is 1 o'clock. Take the adjusted hour and put it here. So how's that looking? Okay, be back at 3:12. Good. But what if I were to run it with 2,700 seconds? Be back at 3:07. So we got the trailing minutes again. So if the minutes is less than 10, then return a 0. Otherwise, return nothing, and then we'll tack the minutes onto the end again. Be back at 3:07. Beautiful. Okay, so we've got our timer working. Our function is working. It's updating, displaying, and everything. Last thing that we need to do now is hook it up to all of these different buttons as well as our minutes here. So if we look at our HTML, you see that each of these buttons here has a data dash time and the number of seconds we wish to run it on it. And then we have a form here, which is a custom number of minutes, not seconds. So let's deal with these buttons. We'll knock them off first. So we'll go in here and first we'll select all of those. So say const buttons equals all, and you want to select anything with the data dash time. So not just a button, it might be a picture, it might be something else, anything that has a data dash time attribute. And then when that happens, we'll go down here, we'll say buttons for each button, button.add event listener. We want to listen for a click. And when that happens, we could run a function called start timer. And we'll go here, we'll make a function called start timer, and we will simply just console log this. Okay, let's see what we got here. 20 seconds, button, got it. So how do we get this data dash timeout? Well, this.dataset will give us an object with the time on it. So this.dataset.time will give us a string of the number of minutes. So we can just put that into a variable, const seconds is equal to this.dataset.time. You want to wrap it in a quick parse int, turn it into a real number, and then we'll console log seconds. 20, 30, good. Working really nicely for us. So what we want to do is then we can simply just call timer seconds, that other function. So click it. Aha, looks like it's working really nicely. Although, watch this, click on work 5. Oh, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So what's going on here? We have these, and if I click a couple of them, let's just go to town here. So I just click at 100 times. Oh my goodness, what's going on? Well, I just queued up 1,000 timers, and there's no way for the timers to cancel themselves out unless the number of seconds hits 0. So that's annoying. What if you click the wrong one? Do you have to refresh the page and then start again? That's not really any way to live your life. What we want to do is when we start our timer, we'll just clear any existing timers. Just clear interval countdown. So if there is a timer in countdown, it will clear it. If there's not, the variable still exists and it's not going to error out on us. So now if I say, oh, not 20, I meant 5. And it's not going back. 15, it's not going back. And you see that our be back time is also updating itself nicely. Good, good, good. Last thing is this form here where you enter in maybe 30 minutes. So we want to take this form right here, which if we go into our HTML, you'll see that this form has a name of custom form. So we'll go into here. And before you select it, I kind of want to show you this little thing. I actually didn't know about it for the longest time. I was always just selecting all of my elements, but did you know that you can type document dot, and then if it has a name attribute on it, custom form, you can just type document.custom form, and that will give us the form element. Similarly, if your input also has a name, it'll just nest itself, .minutes, and that will give us the input. So, whoa, we don't even have to select a single thing. Let's go into our scripts here, and we'll say document custom form.add event listener, and we're going to listen for it. What? Click, enter, no, submit. And then we're going to run a function, proper function here. I'll show you why in a second. Pass the event. Now, if we submit this now, type 10, it refreshes the page and you see the URL says minutes equals 10. How do we stop it from reloading the page and sending the data over a get? We call e.prevent default. That will stop it from running. So 10, good, nothing happens. Then we can get the mins, which is going to be this, because this is the form, dot minutes, which is going to be that text box there that we typed into the input, dot value. And console log our mins to 10. Got it. We can quickly call this dot reset to clear out the value, 10. It'll clear the value and console log it. And then we simply just take that number of minutes that we want. We pass it to our timer. We can't pass it minutes because our timer requires seconds. So multiply that by 60. And if we do it right, so 5 minutes should give us 5 whole minutes. Very nice. So that is our timer. We got a couple of different functions going on here. We have our timeout and whatnot. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I'd love to see how you can take this a little bit further, either adding some animation and some interaction or adding some features in terms of hours and whatnot.